You know that moment when your entire world crumbles while you're doing something as mundane as laundry? Well, picture this. There I was, Susan Parker, being the perfect wife on a Wednesday evening, sorting through my husband's dirty clothes like the devoted domestic goddess I thought I was, when I found a crumpled receipt that made my marriage collapse faster than a house of cards in a tornado. Giovanni's Italian Bistro, $347.89, Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. Now, here's the beautiful irony. I discovered my husband's infidelity while literally cleaning up his messes. The receipt was wadded up in his khakis like discarded evidence, which perfectly described what Brad had apparently done with our 8-year marriage. $347.89 for dinner at the kind of restaurant where they pronounce bruschetta correctly and charge you a week's grocery budget for the privilege. The same restaurant where Brad once told me the prices were absolutely insane, and we should stick to places that don't require taking out a loan. But apparently, financial responsibility goes out the window when you're trying to impress Jennifer Jen Moore from his office's accounting department. Let me properly introduce myself. I'm Susan Parker, 34 years old, marketing coordinator by day, and apparently amateur detective by brutal necessity. I'm the kind of woman who color coordinates her closet, remembers everyone's birthday, and still clips coupons because every dollar saved is a dollar earned, as my late grandmother used to say. I have brown hair that I tell myself looks sun-kissed, but probably just needs professional intervention, and I'm 5'6" in my favorite sneakers. The same sneakers I wear to run errands while my husband apparently wines and dines his coworker on our joint dime. Brad Parker. Yes, we're that couple with matching surnames because I made every predictable choice possible, is a car sales manager with the confidence of someone who peaked in high school but never received the graduation notice. He's got a receding hairline that he hides with increasingly expensive hair products, polo shirts that wage daily battles against his expanding midsection, and the unshakable belief that his opinions about football strategy could revolutionize the NFL. We met 7 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue, back when I thought available and compatible were the same thing. He knew the difference between brisket and ribs, laughed at my jokes without checking his phone, and didn't immediately ghost me after our first date. The bar was apparently buried so deep underground it needed archaeological equipment to find it. Our wedding was Pinterest perfect in the most aggressively mediocre way imaginable. Beige color scheme, predictable venue, chicken or fish dinner options, and a DJ whose idea of musical diversity was playing both Celebration and We Are Family. We honeymooned in Cancun, where Brad spent 3 days with food poisoning while I read romance novels by the pool and wondered if this was divine commentary on our future. Spoiler alert, the universe has an excellent sense of foreshadowing. For 8 years, I've been the gold standard of supportive wives. I laughed at his recycled jokes, pretended to understand his fantasy football obsession, and never complained when he left dirty dishes in the sink, like he was conducting advanced scientific research on bacterial ecosystems. I organized family gatherings, remembered his coworkers' names better than his assistant did, and basically became a one-woman cheerleading squad for his mediocre accomplishments. Meanwhile, I slowly disappeared into the beige wallpaper of suburban married life. My dreams downsized, my world shrunk, and my identity morphed from Susan Parker, marketing professional with opinions, to Brad's wife, the organized one who handles everything domestic. But back to that receipt, crumpled in his Wednesday laundry like a confession written in restaurant ink. $347.89. That's half of what I contribute to our joint savings account every month. You know, the account where I've been religiously depositing money for our future dream house, while Brad was apparently investing in someone else's romantic portfolio. I stood in our laundry room, holding this piece of paper like it might spontaneously combust, trying to process what I was seeing. Because Brad Parker, the man who once haggled with a Subway employee over whether extra pickles warranted an upcharge, had just spent more on one dinner than we typically allocate for entertainment in an entire month. The date on the receipt was Tuesday. The same Tuesday Brad came home at 10:15 p.m. claiming he'd grabbed something quick after staying late for inventory. But here's the thing about Giovanni's. They don't serve quick anything. And their atmosphere doesn't include fluorescent lighting and cash registers that ask if you want to make it a combo. Instead, Brad had arrived home that night smelling like expensive cologne layered over someone else's perfume, with breath that suggested wine pairings rather than drive-through convenience. I'd actually complimented him on his good mood, thinking work was going well. Turns out, work was going very well indeed, just not the kind that involved selling cars. As I stood there surrounded by dirty laundry and devastating evidence, puzzle pieces I'd been willfully ignoring for months suddenly snapped into focus with brutal clarity. The mysterious wardrobe upgrades, the gym membership he never used but somehow always needed to stop by after work, the phone that had evolved from casual communication device to classified government equipment, always face down and within arm's reach, the credit card charges I'd been too trusting to investigate, the florist payment that never resulted in flowers for me, the coffee shop receipts from parts of Austin I'd never visited, the sudden interest in client dinners that always seemed to happen when I had book club or family obligations. Jennifer Moore. I'd met her exactly once at Brad's company Christmas party, where she'd complimented my earrings and recommended a true crime podcast I'd never heard of. She was everything I wasn't, effortlessly confident, naturally funny, and apparently the type of woman who inspired married men to spend their mortgage payment on appetizers. The worst part? I'd genuinely liked her during our brief conversation. We'd talked about serial killer documentaries while Brad mingled with other co-workers, and I'd gone home thinking how fortunate he was to work with such engaging people. Little did I know I was bonding with my future replacement over our shared interest in people who destroyed lives for personal satisfaction. But here's where the story takes an interesting turn. Instead of immediately confronting Brad like any rational person would, instead of crying or screaming or demanding explanations, I did something completely unprecedented for Susan Parker, professional people-pleaser and lifetime president of the Let's Discuss This Calmly Club. I got strategic. Standing in that laundry room, holding evidence of my husband's betrayal while surrounded by his dirty clothes, I realized something liberating. I had approximately 22 hours before Brad's next inventory meeting, which, according to the pattern I was now recognizing, would be tomorrow, Thursday evening. 22 hours to plan something that would transform his romantic dinner into an educational experience about consequences, financial responsibility, and the dangers of underestimating organized women with access to joint credit accounts. I wasn't just going to catch him cheating. I was going to orchestrate the most memorable evening of Brad Parker's life, complete with public embarrassment, financial humiliation, and social consequences that would make his Tuesday night dinner look like a pleasant memory. Susan Parker, perpetual doormat and professional conflict avoider, was about to become Susan Parker, director of karmic justice and executive producer of her husband's comeuppance. And tomorrow night's performance was going to be absolutely spectacular. Before I detail my masterpiece of marital justice, let me paint the complete picture of how I became Mrs. Completely Clueless Parker. Because trust me, the warning signs weren't subtle. I just had the observational skills of someone who'd been gaslit so thoroughly, I started thinking the smell of smoke meant someone was making s'mores. The transformation began about 6 months ago with what I now call the Great Personal Renaissance. Brad went from a man who considered deodorant optional on weekends to someone who owned more grooming products than a professional makeup artist. He started using cologne that cost more than our monthly streaming service budget, began dental flossing for the first time since our engagement photos, and somehow developed strong opinions about thread counts that didn't involve complaining about price tags. When I praised his sudden commitment to personal hygiene, he claimed he was trying to project more professionalism at work. How wonderfully ambitious. Except his definition of professional apparently meant looking good enough to impress someone who wasn't legally obligated to find him attractive. The wardrobe evolution should have triggered every alarm I didn't know I possessed. Brad transformed from exclusively shopping clearance racks to owning shirts that weren't permanently wrinkled. He discovered the revolutionary concept of pants that actually fit his body, learned to coordinate belts with shoes, and somehow acquired the kind of casual confidence that comes from knowing someone appreciates your efforts. I actually bragged to my book club friends about his metamorphosis. Brad's been taking such wonderful care of himself lately, I'd tell them over our monthly wine and literary pretensions. It's like he's rediscovered his self-worth. What he'd actually rediscovered was his ability to attract women who hadn't spent 8 years watching him leave dirty socks everywhere and explain why the Dallas Cowboys were definitely going all the way this year. The gym membership was another red flag I missed with Olympic-level obliviousness. Brad, who once got winded carrying groceries up a single flight of stairs, suddenly developed passionate commitment to cardiovascular health. He'd disappear for workouts at peculiar hours, consistently forgetting his gym bag, and somehow never improving his actual fitness level. But hey, I thought, good for him for prioritizing wellness. I was clearly just being paranoid from watching too many documentaries about lying spouses. Meanwhile, I was living my best suburban housewife fantasy with the dedication of someone auditioning for a lifestyle blog. I meal prepped every Sunday, maintained our social calendar with professional efficiency, and even started that herb garden on our back deck because cooking with fresh basil seemed sophisticated. I was essentially cosplaying as a domestic goddess, while my husband auditioned for the lead role in Married Men Behaving Badly Texas Edition. The phone behavior evolution was perhaps my most spectacular failure of pattern recognition. Brad's device went from being casually abandoned on counters like forgotten mail to becoming a permanent appendage that required constant monitoring. Suddenly, it lived face down, within arm's reach, accompanied by nervous laughter whenever notifications interrupted our conversations. When I mentioned his newfound phone protectiveness, he explained he was practicing being more present in our relationship. How romantically mindful. Except present meant physically occupying the same space while mentally coordinating his extracurricular romantic calendar. The creative dinner excuses started around month 3 of what I now recognize as Operation Replace Susan with Someone More Interesting. Brad's vocabulary expanded to include phrases like unexpected client meeting, late inventory session, and mandatory team dinner, all delivered with the acting prowess of a middle school theater student who'd forgotten his lines. He'd return home at increasingly late hours, claiming he'd grabbed something quick for sustenance, but somehow never smelling like fast food. Instead, he'd arrive carrying the aromatic evidence of expensive restaurants and unfamiliar perfume, wearing the satisfied expression of someone who'd enjoyed excellent wine and even better company. But did I question these obvious inconsistencies? Of course not. I was too busy being grateful that he was so committed to advancing his career. Meanwhile, the only thing advancing was his relationship with Jennifer Moore, funded by our joint checking account. I should have recognized catastrophic problems when Brad started conducting surveillance operations on his own wife. What time does book club usually end? Are you still planning to visit your sister this Saturday? What's your typical target schedule? He was basically running reconnaissance missions while I thought he was showing renewed interest in my social life. The most pathetic part? I occasionally modified my plans to accommodate what I assumed was his desire for more together time. When he'd inquire about my evening activities, I'd sometimes cancel or abbreviate social engagements because I thought he wanted to spend quality time reconnecting. Turns out, he just needed accurate intelligence about when our house would be available for whatever married men do when they're planning affairs. The mysterious credit card charges began appearing 3 months ago, but I rationalized every single transaction like a defense attorney for my own marriage. Coffee shop in an unfamiliar neighborhood? Perhaps he was exploring new lunch options. Restaurant I'd never heard of? Probably networking with colleagues. Florist charge that sparked excitement about potential surprises? Spoiler alert, those flowers were definitely not destined for our kitchen table. I actually inquired about some charges using my sweetest, most non-threatening voice. Oh, that Italian place looks elegant. We should try it together sometime. His response? Maybe eventually. It's not really your type of place, though. Apparently, my type was chain restaurants with kids' menus, while Jen's preferences required actual reservations and wine that didn't come with twist-off caps. The beautiful irony of this entire situation, I was the family's financial administrator. I balanced our checkbook, managed our savings goals, set up all our account alerts. and basically served as unpaid bookkeeper for our household, including, as it turned out, maintaining detailed records of Brad's romantic investment portfolio. Every credit card notification was essentially real-time updates on my husband's infidelity, delivered directly to my phone by my own organizational efficiency. I was funding my own humiliation while keeping meticulous documentation of every transaction. If betrayal were a business model, I'd have been Employee of the Month for my dedication to accurate financial record-keeping. Meanwhile, Jennifer Moore was living her best life as the primary beneficiary of my excellent money management skills. Every romantic dinner I subsidized while eating frozen meals alone, every expensive evening I financed while clipping grocery coupons, every hotel charge I funded while organizing our linen closet. She was enjoying the lifestyle I was budgeting for but never experiencing. Wednesday evening, after discovering that receipt, I spent 4 hours conducting forensic analysis of our financial records with the dedication of a CPA during tax season. The pattern was gorgeous in its predictability. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 8 weeks. Mysterious charges at establishments I'd never visited, in Austin neighborhoods I'd never explored, during hours when I was home managing our domestic operations while Brad managed his double life. Giovanni's receipt for $347.89 wasn't an isolated incident. It was the crescendo of a financial symphony of deception. There were dozens of supporting transactions. Upscale coffee shops, wine bars, that boutique hotel downtown that charges more per night than our monthly mortgage payment. Brad had essentially been conducting a comprehensive romantic campaign, using our shared resources while I stayed home optimizing our household budget and researching bulk purchasing strategies. But here's where Susan Parker, lifetime member of the Surely There's a Reasonable Explanation Club, decided to do something completely unprecedented. Instead of confronting him immediately like any sensible person would, instead of demanding explanations or scheduling couples counseling, I made a decision that surprised even me. I decided to get creative. And tomorrow evening, when Brad assumed he was heading to another romantic dinner funded by his wife's financial responsibility, he was going to discover that sometimes the best education comes from experiencing consequences in real time. That crumpled receipt wasn't just evidence of his betrayal. It was a roadmap to the most enlightening evening of Brad Parker's adult life. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that comes from finally seeing your life in high definition, instead of through the soft focus filter of willful ignorance. I woke up with a plan so perfectly orchestrated, it could have been composed by the universe's Department of Poetic Justice. The magnificent thing about being married to someone predictably dishonest is that their patterns become as reliable as atomic clocks. Brad departed for work at 7:30 a.m. with his standard forehead kiss and familiar promise. Probably running late tonight. Big inventory session with the regional manager. I smiled sweetly and wished him a productive day while mentally scheduling his upcoming educational experience. Phase 1 required reconnaissance disguised as wifely concern. Around 10 a.m., I called Brad's office using my cheerfully supportive, checking on my hard-working husband voice to speak with Maria, his assistant. "Hi, Maria, it's Susan. I wanted to surprise Brad with his favorite dinner tonight, but I know he mentioned possibly working late. Is that inventory meeting definitely happening?" Maria, bless her unsuspecting heart, provided more intelligence than she realized. "Oh yes, Mrs. Parker. Mr. Brad blocked his entire calendar from 6 to 10 p.m. for tonight. He specifically requested no interruptions for his very important client consultation." Perfect. A 4-hour window of inventory management that definitely wasn't happening anywhere near actual inventory. I thanked Maria enthusiastically and spent the remainder of the morning fine-tuning my masterpiece. The first crucial step required a performance worthy of professional recognition. Around lunchtime, I contacted our credit card company using my most distressed voice. "Hi, I need to report my credit card as lost or stolen," I informed the customer service representative, whose name was apparently Jessica, and who sounded like she'd rather be literally anywhere else on the planet. "When did you last use your card, ma'am?" Jessica asked with the enthusiasm of someone reciting scripts for the millionth time. "I'm honestly not sure," I replied, allowing just the right amount of panic to color my voice. I went shopping yesterday and thought I had it, but now I can't locate it anywhere. I'm worried someone might have taken it, or maybe it fell out of my purse. Jessica guided me through standard fraud prevention protocol. I'm immediately canceling your current card and will expedite a replacement within 2 business days. Any charges attempted after this moment will be automatically declined and flagged as potentially fraudulent activity. Absolutely beautiful. I thanked Jessica profusely and disconnected with the satisfaction of someone who'd just armed a very expensive time bomb set to detonate at precisely the right moment. But credit card cancellation was merely the opening act of tomorrow's performance. See, I'd invested 8 years being the perfect supportive wife, the one who memorized anniversary dates and coworkers' birthdays, the one who understood Brad's schedule better than his own personal assistant. Today, all that accumulated knowledge was about to become strategically weaponized. My next conversation was one I'd been avoiding for years, but suddenly anticipated with genuine excitement. Calling Margaret Parker, my mother-in-law. Margaret represents what you'd diplomatically describe as a traditional woman with unwavering convictions about marriage, family values, and maintaining respectable public appearances. She's also the type of mother who raised her son with crystal-clear expectations about how married men should conduct themselves. "Margaret, it's Susan," I announced when she answered, employing my most serious daughter-in-law tone. "I need to discuss something quite important concerning Brad's recent behavior." The conversation that followed was a masterclass in strategic information warfare. I didn't open with accusations. I led with genuine concern. "I've been noticing some troubling changes in Brad's patterns, and I discovered some receipts that are extremely concerning. I have strong reasons to believe he's having an affair." Margaret's response exceeded my highest expectations. The woman who'd invested 35 years raising Brad to be a respectable gentleman was not pleased to discover her parenting investment was yielding questionable returns. "That boy," she declared with the tone of someone personally offended by moral failures, "was raised significantly better than this behavior suggests." I provided carefully selected evidence to ignite her maternal outrage without revealing my complete strategy. The suspicious credit card charges, the mysterious schedule modifications, the sudden obsession with personal grooming. Margaret absorbed every detail like a prosecutor constructing an airtight case. "What do you need from me?" she asked, which was precisely what I'd hoped to hear. "I need him to face appropriate consequences," I stated simply, "and I need assurance that his family won't enable him to avoid responsibility for his choices." Margaret Parker, I discovered, maintained stronger convictions about family honor than family loyalty when the two concepts conflicted. "Consider that handled," she replied with the authority of someone who'd spent decades ensuring actions produced consequences. Thursday afternoon, I took a strategic drive to Jen's apartment complex. Yes, I knew her address because Brad had mentioned it during one of his complaints about Austin traffic patterns, and I possess an excellent memory for details that later prove useful for justice purposes. I wasn't planning direct confrontation. That approach would be messy and potentially legally problematic. Instead, I had something far more elegant in mind. Jen resided in one of those trendy young professional complexes featuring community bulletin boards, active social media groups, and residents who probably thrived on neighborhood drama. I invested considerable time crafting the perfect anonymous community notice. "Attention residents. Please be aware that Jennifer Moore in Unit 3B is currently conducting an affair with a married man. They've been observed together at multiple local establishments. Thought the community should understand what type of person shares our amenities. A concerned neighbor who values community integrity." I printed multiple copies at different locations: FedEx, the public library, and a copy shop, using various fonts and paper types to create several versions. By Thursday evening, Jen's bulletin board would resemble a community announcement about her extracurricular activities. My final preparation involved calling a locksmith. Carlos from Reliable Austin Locksmith was available Thursday afternoon and didn't ask uncomfortable questions when I explained that my estranged husband needed to be denied access for personal security reasons. He simply nodded professionally and scheduled the appointment for 3 p.m. Thursday, well before Brad's client consultation, but hours after his departure for work. Thursday evening arrived with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for championship games or elaborate revenge fantasies finally materializing. Brad left work following his standard routine, completely oblivious that this would be his double life's final performance. I spent the day in calm preparation, like a theater director ensuring every detail was perfect before opening night. At noon, I posted the community notices at Jen's complex. At 3 p.m., Carlos changed our locks with professional efficiency. At 4 p.m., I confirmed with Margaret that she was available for an important conversation with Bradley this evening. By 5:30 p.m., I was home in my most comfortable pajamas, positioned on our couch with excellent wine and my phone, watching the clock count down to what would undoubtedly be the most educational evening of Brad Parker's adult existence. At 6:15 p.m., I received Brad's predictable text, "Heading into the big meeting now. We'll definitely be late. Don't wait up for me." At 6:30 p.m., I called our credit card company's customer service line one final time. "Hi, I reported my card as lost yesterday, and I wanted to confirm it's definitely been canceled, because I'm noticing some suspicious activity attempts." The representative confirmed that any usage attempts would be immediately declined and flagged as potentially fraudulent. Absolutely perfect. At 7 p.m., I settled comfortably with my wine and phone to await the evening's entertainment. Somewhere across Austin, Brad and Jen were probably reviewing Giovanni's wine selection, completely unaware that their romantic evening was about to transform into a financial catastrophe and social disaster that would make reality television seem boring by comparison. The first call arrived at exactly 7:43 p.m., and it wasn't from Brad. The first call came from an unknown number, which made the moment even more delicious than I'd anticipated. It was Giovanni's restaurant manager calling to inform me there was a payment issue at my husband's table, and they needed to speak with the primary cardholder immediately. "Oh my goodness," I responded in my most genuinely concerned voice. "What type of issue are we talking about? Is everything all right?" The manager, who sounded like someone who'd navigated awkward situations before, but really didn't want to be managing this particular crisis on a Thursday evening, explained that my credit card had been declined multiple times and was showing as canceled due to suspected fraudulent activity. "That's so strange," I continued with Academy Award-worthy confusion. "I did report my card as missing yesterday because I couldn't locate it anywhere in my purse. Are you absolutely certain it's my husband attempting to use it? Could you possibly describe the gentleman for verification purposes?" The manager proceeded to describe Brad down to his receding hairline, tendency toward dramatic hand gestures when telling stories, and habit of over-explaining wine selections to appear sophisticated. "That definitely sounds like my husband," I confirmed. "But I'm quite confused because I'm currently at home. Is he there with another person? Because if he's using a canceled card, I'm genuinely worried something might be seriously wrong." There was an extended pause filled with background restaurant noise. "Ma'am, your husband is dining with a female companion. They've already ordered and consumed most of their meal." "A female companion?" I allowed precisely the right amount of hurt to creep into my voice. "I see. Well, as I mentioned, the card was canceled yesterday due to security concerns, so any charges would be automatically declined. I'm sorry you're dealing with this awkward situation, but I cannot authorize payment for a dinner I had no knowledge was occurring." I could hear muffled conversation in the background, Brad's voice escalating toward panic, the manager attempting to maintain professional composure in an increasingly unprofessional situation, and what sounded like Jen asking repeatedly, "What's happening? Why is everyone looking at us? What should we do regarding the outstanding bill?" the manager inquired. "That's entirely between you and the individuals who ordered the meal," I replied sweetly. "I certainly hope they have alternative payment arrangements available. Best of luck resolving this situation." I disconnected and immediately activated a timer on my phone. I estimated exactly 3 minutes before Brad would be calling with his number. 2 minutes and 54 seconds later, my phone illuminated with Hubby, a contact name I'd been intending to update for months and was now profoundly grateful I'd procrastinated changing. "Susan, what the hell did you do?" Brad's voice was pure panic seasoned with public humiliation. I could hear restaurant ambiance in the background, and Jen asking frantically, "What's happening? People are taking pictures." "Oh, hi, sweetheart," I responded with the brightness of someone genuinely delighted to hear from him. "How's that crucial inventory meeting progressing? You sound like you're in a restaurant rather than reviewing stock reports." "Susan, this isn't remotely funny. Our credit card was declined, and the manager called you directly. Did you actually tell them I was here with another woman?" "Well, are you?" I asked with innocent curiosity. "Because I reported our card as missing yesterday after I couldn't locate it anywhere. Amusing coincidence, though. I actually discovered it this morning in my purse, right beside a fascinating receipt from Giovanni's for nearly $400. From Tuesday evening. The same Tuesday you claimed to be working late on inventory." The silence was absolutely magnificent. I could practically hear Brad's brain short-circuiting as he attempted to calculate how to explain his way out of this situation while standing in an expensive restaurant with his mistress and a declined credit card. "Look, I can explain everything," he began, which universally translates to, "I'm about to construct elaborate lies." "Oh, I'm confident you can explain," I interrupted cheerfully. "But first, you might want to resolve how you're paying for dinner. I understand Giovanni's maintains strict policies about unpaid bills, and I'm fairly certain your personal credit card is maxed out from all those other mysterious charges I've been documenting." That's when I heard Jen in the background, her voice carrying the mortification that comes from realizing your romantic evening has become dinner theater. "Brad, people are literally photographing this situation. This is absolutely humiliating." The sweet symphony of social consequences colliding with financial reality. Nothing quite like having your affair interrupted by basic restaurant economics and iPhone documentation. "Susan, please," Brad pleaded, his voice now carrying the desperate tone of someone watching their carefully constructed double life implode in real time. "Just call the credit card company and authorize this one charge. We can discuss everything when I get home tonight." "Regarding that," I said casually, pausing to sip my wine, "you might want to arrange alternative accommodations tonight. I had our locks changed this afternoon." Another pause. This one so extended I wondered if the call had dropped. "You what?" "Changed the locks. You know, for security purposes. Since apparently I can't trust the person who possessed keys to make honest decisions about where he actually lives anymore. Seemed like a reasonable precaution." The background noise was escalating dramatically. I could hear the manager attempting diplomatic resolution, other diners obviously paying attention to the unfolding drama, and Jen having what sounded like a complete emotional breakdown about her professional reputation and community standing. "Susan, you cannot just lock me out of my own house." "Actually, I can. Both our names appear on the deed, which means I possess equal authority to change locks as you do to spend our joint funds on romantic evenings with your girlfriend." The locksmith was very understanding when I explained that my husband had been using our shared credit card for unauthorized romantic expenditures. That's when Brad made the critical tactical error of choosing anger over apology. "This is absolutely insane. You're being completely irrational." "Irrational?" I laughed, and it felt genuinely therapeutic to laugh authentically for the first time in months. "Brad, you've been using our joint credit card to fund a relationship with another woman while I stay home eating microwave dinners and balancing our household budget. If anyone's behaving irrationally, it's the man who thought his wife would never notice $400 romantic dinners in a city where our usual splurge is Applebee's happy hour." I could hear increasingly frantic whispering between Brad and Jen, what sounded like the manager approaching their table again with obvious reluctance, and Brad's voice becoming progressively more desperate. "Look, I'll figure out payment somehow, and then I'm coming home so we can resolve this like mature adults." "You're absolutely welcome to try," I said sweetly. "But Brad, you should probably call your mother. She's expecting to hear from you this evening. Something about family values and public embarrassment. She expressed quite strong opinions about married men who apparently forgot their upbringing." The line went so quiet I could practically hear Brad's blood pressure spiking. "You called my mother?" "I spoke with Margaret yesterday, actually. We had a wonderful conversation about marriage, commitment, and how disappointed she was to learn that her son had apparently forgotten everything she taught him about being a decent human being. She's very much anticipating your phone call. Oh, and Brad? I added as a delightful afterthought. You might want to check on Jen's living situation as well. I understand her neighbors have become quite observant about community standards and personal integrity. I disconnected before he could respond and immediately poured myself another generous glass of wine. Phase 1 was complete, and the results exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. My phone began ringing again immediately, but I allowed it to proceed to voicemail. Then again. By the 5th consecutive call in 8 minutes, I turned the device off entirely and decided to enjoy the peaceful tranquility of my newly secure home. Around 9:30 p.m., I heard the predictable sounds of someone testing keys that no longer functioned, followed by increasingly frustrated rattling of door handles that wouldn't cooperate. Then came knocking, which progressed to more insistent knocking, which eventually evolved into full pounding, accompanied by Brad calling my name with the kind of desperation usually reserved for natural disasters. I reactivated my phone and composed a single text message. Hotel expenses accumulate quickly when you've been spending our money on dinner dates. Your mother's contact information is in your phone if you need somewhere to stay. Or perhaps Jen has the available couch, assuming her neighbors haven't seen the community bulletin announcements yet. The pounding stopped immediately. 22 minutes later, I received a text from Margaret. Bradley is here. We're having an extensive conversation about consequences and responsibility. Thank you for informing me about what type of man I apparently raised. Perfect. Let him explain to his mother why he was sleeping in his childhood bedroom at 35 years old. Not because of youthful indiscretions, but because he'd systematically betrayed his wife's trust and depleted their joint accounts to fund an affair with his coworker. I slept better that night than I had in 8 months, in a bed that suddenly felt enormous and significantly less disappointing. The house maintained a peaceful quiet that felt therapeutic rather than lonely, and for the first time in years, I fell asleep without wondering what lies I'd need to pretend to believe the following day. But the beautiful thing about consequences is they don't conclude with one humiliating dinner. They tend to compound and multiply, like interest on debt that continues growing until someone finally pays attention to the balance. And Brad Parker's educational week was just beginning. Friday morning dawned with the kind of pristine clarity that comes from finally inhabiting reality instead of a carefully maintained fantasy. I awakened to 26 missed calls, 62 text messages, and the profound peace that accompanies no longer pretending someone else's lies make rational sense. The text messages were a masterpiece of escalating panic and diminishing dignity. They began with Brad's damage control attempts. We need to discuss this situation rationally. Progressed through desperate bargaining. I can explain everything if you just allow me inside. Escalated to frustrated anger. You had absolutely no right to embarrass me publicly like that. And finally devolved into pure desperation. I'm sleeping on my mother's couch and she won't stop lecturing me about family honor and personal responsibility. But the genuine entertainment arrived via unknown numbers. Text messages from complete strangers who'd apparently witnessed or heard about the Giovanni's incident through Austin's remarkably efficient social media network. One message read, "Girl, you are absolutely legendary. The entire city is discussing the credit card situation." Another declared, "My friend works at Giovanni's and says the kitchen staff is still laughing about it during their shifts." My personal favorite came from someone whose neighbor lived in Jen's apartment complex. The bulletin board strategy was pure genius. Jen packed up and moved out overnight. The whole building is buzzing about professional ethics and community standards. I spent Friday morning doing something revolutionary. Exactly what I wanted to accomplish. I systematically organized our bedroom, boxing up all of Brad's possessions with the efficiency of someone who'd been mentally preparing for this moment for months without realizing it. I canceled our joint Netflix subscription and established a new account featuring exclusively my preferences. No more sports documentaries or action movies I'd never requested to endure. I even rearranged our furniture, repositioning the couch to face our large window instead of the television, because I'd always preferred natural light to Brad's constant commentary about whatever game happened to be playing. The house began resembling a space where I actually lived rather than a museum dedicated to accommodating someone else's comfort preferences. Around noon, Margaret called. "Susan, dear, we need to discuss Bradley's future living arrangements and behavior." "Art?" It was the first time in 8 years she'd addressed me as dear instead of Brad's wife. "Of course," I replied, settling into my favorite reading chair with fresh coffee in my preferred mug. "How did your conversation proceed?" "Bradley has admitted to everything," she stated with the tone of someone who'd spent decades teaching children about consequences and was profoundly disappointed to discover her lessons hadn't been permanently absorbed. The other woman, the restaurant charges, the systematic lies about working late, all of it. I provided Margaret with my complete timeline, the months of suspicious behavioral changes, the credit card charges, the receipt I'd discovered, the comprehensive pattern of deception that had been developing for 6 months. Margaret listened with the kind of focused attention she'd never previously paid to my stories about work accomplishments or family events. "That boy was raised to be honest and faithful," she said finally. "This behavior does not represent who I taught him to become." "No," I agreed. "You raised him excellently. This represents who he consciously chose to become despite your good parenting." There was an extended pause. "What do you need from me to move forward successfully?" That's when I realized something beautiful was occurring. Margaret wasn't calling to defend her son or request that I forgive his behavior. She was calling to determine how to help me handle the situation with dignity while ensuring Brad faced appropriate consequences for his choices. "I need him to understand that this marriage is completely finished," I stated simply. "And I need to initiate divorce proceedings without drama, manipulation attempts, or family interference." "Consider it handled," Margaret replied with the authority of someone who'd spent 35 years ensuring that actions produced consequences. "Bradley will behave appropriately throughout this process, or he'll discover himself without family support during these proceedings." 2 days later, Brad arrived with his mother and sister to collect his belongings. He appeared like someone who'd spent an extended weekend being lectured by every woman who'd ever held authority over him and finally understood that charm and manipulation don't work on people who'd witnessed his childhood tantrums. "Susan," he began, but Margaret interrupted with a look that could have stopped highway traffic. "Bradley will apologize sincerely," she announced firmly, "collect his possessions, and leave you in peace to begin your new life." Brad's apology represented everything I'd expected. A comprehensive masterclass in non-apologies featuring phrases like, "Mistakes were made," and, "If my actions caused you to feel hurt." But I no longer required a quality apology. I needed him permanently gone, and Margaret was ensuring that occurred efficiently. "Your belongings are boxed and ready by the entrance," I informed him, gesturing toward the neat stack I'd prepared. "My attorney's contact information is with your mother." As they loaded boxes into Margaret's vehicle, Brad attempted one final manipulation. "You understand I love you, right? This situation with Jen, it was meaningless. It didn't represent anything important." "I understand completely," I replied with calm finality, feeling nothing except tired relief. "That's precisely the problem. I was important, and you traded me for something meaningless. That tells me everything I need to know about your judgment and character." He departed without another word, and I watched from my front window as Margaret's car pulled away, carrying the physical remnants of my previous life. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Texas community property laws meant I received half of everything, including half of the credit card debt Brad had accumulated financing his relationship with Jen. The final accounting was almost poetic in its justice. He'd spent nearly $9,000 over 6 months on hotels, restaurants, gifts, and romantic weekends, all funded by our joint accounts while I remained home managing our household budget and researching bulk purchasing strategies. The most satisfying aspect of the settlement was retaining our house. Since I'd been making consistent mortgage payments and could demonstrate financial stability, the judge awarded me complete ownership in exchange for assuming full mortgage responsibility. Brad retained his credit card debt and whatever memories those expensive dinners had created. Jen, meanwhile, discovered that dating a recently divorced man with substantial financial obligations and a mother who actively despised her wasn't quite the romantic adventure she'd imagined during their affair. They separated approximately 2 months after the divorce was finalized, when Brad couldn't afford to maintain the lifestyle she'd become accustomed to during their restaurant tour of Austin. Last I heard, she'd relocated to Dallas for a fresh beginning, which is Texas code for escape the social consequences of your personal choices. Brad attempted to re-enter the dating scene, but word had spread through Austin's surprisingly interconnected social circles. Apparently, women aren't enthusiastic about dating men who are notorious for financial infidelity and public restaurant humiliation. His dating profile probably should have included recently divorced due to credit card fraud and community embarrassment. Complicated mother relationships included at no additional charge. As for me, I'm thriving beyond my expectations. 6 months post-divorce, I received a promotion to marketing director. Apparently, when you're not investing all your emotional energy managing someone else's poor decisions, you have significantly more bandwidth for professional success. I enrolled in pottery classes because I'd always wanted to learn, but never had time when I was busy performing the role of perfect supportive wife. I even returned to Giovanni's on the 1-year anniversary of the incident. The manager recognized me immediately and sent complimentary champagne with a note. For the most memorable evening in our restaurant's history. You're welcome anytime, and we guarantee all payment systems are functioning perfectly. My house feels completely transformed now. The walls are painted colors that make me genuinely happy. The refrigerator contains food I actually want to consume, and there's not a single sports channel programmed into my cable subscription. I wake up every morning in a space that reflects my choices rather than compromises with someone else's preferences. Sometimes people ask whether I regret how I handled the situation, whether I wish I'd attempted counseling or offered Brad another opportunity. The answer remains consistent. The only thing I regret is not canceling that credit card 6 months earlier, because 8 years of marriage and 1 perfect evening of financial justice taught me this essential truth. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is stop trying to save someone who's actively choosing to betray your trust. And sometimes the most effective way to teach someone about consequences is to allow them to experience those consequences completely, even if they arrive in the middle of an expensive dinner with their girlfriend. In the end, I didn't just cancel a credit card. I canceled a subscription to a life that was slowly erasing my identity, one joint decision at a time. And unlike Brad's relationship with Jen, my cancellation came with absolutely no regrets and 0 interest in renewal options. Turns out the best revenge isn't simply living well. It's living authentically, with complete control over your own financial decisions and no one else's permission required to be happy. And that, my friends, is worth more than every expensive dinner in Austin combined.